effort to help lead and drive the country toward a new emphasis on math and science education. First, to summarize some points from yesterday, this is not a new area for us to be engaged in. For more than 100 years, the company has supported programs to enhance education in the country. Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia is named for Barbara Spelman, who was the wife of John D. Rockefeller. And so it dates back for more than a century, and for more than the last 50 years, we've actually operated a foundation which has had a strong emphasis in math and science. More recently, we have supported a number of programs with the central focus being on cities where our company had significant employee populations or operational facilities: Houston, Dallas, the Washington, D.C. area, Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, and a few other cities. And we frankly didn't do very much that extended much beyond the scope of our local communities. And I think you'll find that that is a fairly consistent strategy among large companies who are involved in philanthropic efforts to support education. So two things have happened in the last 2 to 3 years at ExxonMobil and at the ExxonMobil Foundation. The first was that Rising Above the Gathering Storm was published. Actually, some of our staff supported some of the research activities that went into that report, and the former chairman of Exxon, Lee Raymond, was a member of the panel, the National Academy's panel that published the report. So we were well aware and well advised of the findings and the recommendations from Rising Above the Gathering Storm, and made some relatively rapid decisions to increase the scope and reach and financial support for programs focused on math and science, and whether that involved teachers or involved students or schools and school districts. And we significantly increased our funding for those programs. As I mentioned earlier, they span the gamut of activities, from support from some of the traditional organizations, such as the Society of Women Engineers, the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering, SECME, Teach for America, any organization that had sound programs in this area. We tended to have already supported, and we increased our support for those activities. But we also noticed that we believe something more needed to be done because of a recognition that the crisis in STEM education was in fact a crisis. Whether it's measured by the numbers of U.S.-born graduates of U.S. higher education and engineering programs in U.S. higher education, all the way to the performance of our fourth graders measured against their international peers, where the data across the board seemed to be somewhat distressing, and a more systemic approach needed in order to effect broad change in the country. So typical knee-jerk response is to, again, increase the amount of money that you're putting in these programs. We took a different tack and met Tom Luce, former Assistant Secretary of Education, who had formed an organization called the National Math and Science Initiative. The novel approach, if I can use that term, for the National Math and Science Initiative was that it was their intent to take successful and proven programs and make them available nationally. Tom Luce had observed often there are hundreds, if not thousands, of very good local programs that lack the ability to be scaled nationally. And so it was his intent to develop an organization and put in place the infrastructure, the management team, the governance process that would allow the rapid and efficient scale-up of the most successful programs across the country. And that's how the National Math and Science Initiative was born. we took a very quick look at what they had done within their first 3 months of existence, and in a somewhat unprecedented process for its recruitment within the management process of a large organization such as ours, we committed the largest corporate grant to support math and science education that we had done in the history of ExxonMobil and the ExxonMobil Foundation. So what has NIMSA been able to accomplish in its 1 year of existence? They selected 2 programs, both of which had a more than decade-long track record of success. The first, called You Teach, is a program to prepare math and science teachers who are both drawn from some of the nation's top research institutions, and secondly, teachers who have subject matter mastery indicated by having achieved or matriculated in a major in one of the natural sciences, or in mathematics or engineering or computer science. The original program at UT has been in existence for just over a decade. It now numbers some 500 in the screen there, so you'll have to look at that screen and listen to me, so I'm going to leave the screen just as is and see if I can get through this fairly quickly so we can get to a Q&A session. So the UT's program, they designed a program where they could take someone who, for example, a math major who had matriculated in the School of Mathematics with the intent on earning a degree in math, and in the same 4-year period they would also acquire their teacher certification, the necessary courses in pedagogy and leadership in order to become effective teachers, and importantly, 3 semesters of student teaching and at least 1 significant leadership experience through an internship program, usually at a local not-for-profit organization. They worked very hard over time to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and we believe had produced a very efficient process, as evidenced by numbers of young people that we were meeting who were both motivated to enter teaching, and some 92% of the young people who entered the program actually entered teaching upon graduation from the university, and 4 years later, more than 80% were still teaching. So the mentoring programs, the networking opportunities that have been set up, all seem to be very effective in inspiring these young people to enter teaching, and many of them to remain in teaching at far above the levels we're seeing across the country. The second program is called Advanced Placement Training and Incentives. This is, as I sometimes call it, good old advanced placement. The focus is math, science, and English because of the need to be an effective communicator. And but it's with a twist. First, the base program that this program is modeled on started in Dallas, Texas, a school district with about 85% of the kids qualifying for free or reduced lunch. About 80% of the kids are members of minority groups, kind of a standard urban district that was largely underperforming across the broad measures that we typically use to look at the success of a typical school district. And in this district, starting roughly 12 years ago, there were virtually, it was the AP participation was at about as low a level as one could expect. Fewer than 200 passing AP exams in the entire school district. Some 10 years later, nearly 2,000 passing AP exams. How did they do it? They made AP more accessible, more available by training more teachers to teach AP courses. They offer the teachers incentives for completing the training and incentives for every student who takes their course and passes the AP exam with a score of 3 or better. So teachers have incentives. Incentives are also offered to the students, typically a $100 payment if they take and pass the AP exam. And the net effect of this program has been a more than tenfold increase in AP participation, successful AP participation in math and science in Dallas, Texas. Quick statistic, when we looked at what happened to young people who never took an AP course, who graduated from a typical Dallas high school, only 15% earned any kind of university degree within 6 years of graduation from high school. For students who passed at least one AP exam while in high school, the 6-year graduation rate rose to 60%. For us, fairly compelling and easy to understand data that this program is working in Dallas, Texas, and is worthy of expansion across the country. So that's the NIMSY program. NIMSY is a separate organization. It is not affiliated with ExxonMobil. It is separate. They have I'll just flash this up here, but I don't want you to look at it. You probably can't read it, but the board of directors is shown on the chart. There, some very distinguished people, a couple of former astronauts, including Sally Ride and Bernard Harris, several university presidents, several former Fortune 100 CEOs, and other distinguished people in the education community have decided to join the board of NIMSY. They put in place a very strong governance structure. They developed a very strong, what I would call business-oriented management team with a very clear strategy, performance metrics, an accountability system. In the first year, the AP program has been implemented in 7 states across the country. The typical grant is about $13.5 million. Each state has to set up its own not-for-profit governing structure with the complete support of the governor of the state. And so in 1 year, they've been able to put this process together and implement it in 7 states. The UTeach program is now in 13 universities. The plan for UTeach, if we can fully fund NIMSY, would be to extend it to some 55 universities over roughly the next 5 years. If we're successful in raising enough money to support expansion of the program to those universities would then produce about 4,500 highly qualified math and science teachers per year, or just about 1/2 of the number recommended by Rising Above the Gathering Storm in the chapter entitled 10,000 Teachers, 10 Million Minds. So we think these are very focused, targeted programs, successful models, being scaled nationally. The real soft spot for us is $125 million from ExxonMobil, plus grants from the Gates Foundation and the Michael and Susan Dale Foundation. To date, have supplied only about somewhere around 1/6 of the money needed. And we need and that's about roughly $150, $160 million. This is a $1 billion program to go to 55 universities and 20 states. To get 100 universities in 50 states, slightly more than double the money, $2.5 billion would do it. We would love to see an appropriation from Congress under the America Competes Act, which we think could do it. The structures in place for the efficient rollout of these programs. So I'll end my comments here, and we'll take questions later on.
Thank you, Gerald. Patrick?
All right. So I'm just going to briefly try to describe a little bit about the work in California that we're doing. As a bit of background, this science and mathematics initiative started in May of 2004 when the governor of California made a compact with the president of the university. As is often the case, this was precipitated by the realization that there was a critical shortage of math and science teachers. I mean, this is true nationally. But to give you an idea of just what it's like in California, if every single one of the universities in California combined, they produce in a given year about 1,300 mathematics baccalaureate degrees. That's private and public universities. I'm not just talking about the University of California system. The need, based on the estimates of the California Department of Education, for new mathematics high school or secondary teachers in 1 year is around 2,100. So even if every single person who graduated with a math degree became a teacher, that would barely cover half of the need. So that's, that's a very sobering statistic. The physical sciences are not much better. It's a little bit different in life science because of one thing. I mean, the number of life science majors is almost a factor of 10 higher because everyone goes to college into biology thinking they're going to become doctors. But that's, so there's different situations, math and science across the board, but still, the need to deal with this supply and demand issue is huge. So in 2004, this compact was made, and what that essentially entailed was that the University of California system and the CSU system would get a very small amount of state money to try to ramp up their efforts. And this resulted in the Science and Mathematics Initiative in the University of California system with a numerical benchmark set. And in 2005, the original director, Linda Goff, came up with the idea of 1,000 teachers, 1 million minds. And as mentioned earlier, that was later parlayed into the American Competes Act and the Rattling Above the Gathering Storm as 10,000 teachers, 10 million minds, as a numeric benchmark, a goal. And again, I mean, it's staggering for the country to produce 10,000 new math and science teachers every year, and that still wouldn't completely cover the need. So, that said, we rolled out in 2005 and started doing this. The University of California, of course, it wasn't the first time they'd ever thought about producing teachers. There's a long history. I learned recently at the university, for example, the University of California, LA is celebrating its 125th anniversary for their teacher education program. That said, the University of California is a Research One university system, and teaching prospective teachers and preparing teachers is not often seen as one of the primary goals. I mean, well, it's typically not. It's seen as a research university. And as such, there's a legitimate question why research universities should be involved in the preparation of teachers, or why focus there as opposed to maybe ramping up the teacher colleges, the California state system, for example. Well, there's really two answers. First of all, this problem is too big for any one organization to solve, or any one institution. Everyone needs to participate. And the second is, especially in mathematics and science, the University of California has world-class scientists and mathematicians, world-class faculty, world-class research, facilities, laboratories, and so it's a natural place to prepare teachers in mathematics and science because they're going to be surrounded by this. And this couples with the idea that a really effective teacher needs both the pedagogical experiences and the content base. So that gets us to what's perhaps missing. The University of California system and research universities in general definitely have the content domains covered, but what about the teaching part, the pedagogy, and in particular K-12 practitioners? And so that was really a new piece, and it's no coincidence that in reflecting, this is very much one of the things that was identified by NIMSY and the UTeach program as one of their essential elements as well. You need to have K-12 practitioners. You need to have teachers involved in this program. UTeach does. They have their master teachers. And the CalTeach program also. We have master teachers working with the programs on every campus, and we have mentor teachers out in the schools working with the students, that the prospective teachers. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. So once you include that piece and build it up, then you really have a complete package of offerings that are really compelling and powerful for producing teachers. So what else is there to this program? What's new? what was really new about this initiative in UC California, and is typical of many places, was that it had what's sometimes called a coupled system. To become a high school physics teacher, you get a physics degree, and then you take some education classes. And you teach right away, eliminated that model and integrated so that the pedagogy was together with the science. And this is something that was also done in California. The other thing was start early, recruit heavily. We try to get freshmen. We send out letters to incoming students telling them that this is an option for them. This aggressive recruiting is an essential component of the UTeach program as well. This also, besides informing people about this program, is doing a valuable thing, and that is changing the attitude on a Research One campus about the value of teaching. And that is something that I think there's been huge transformation. I can speak personally about the University of California system, where 3 years ago, when this compact was made to increase the amount of math and science teachers produced, there was some serious discussion about amongst the faculty about, is this something we really want to do? I mean, why would you want to go to Berkeley to become a teacher? I mean, if you're going to go to an elite research university, you should become a researcher. If you want to become a teacher, go somewhere else. Well, and as I've said before, this was not the case at all. The data suggested perhaps otherwise, considering that Berkeley was only producing a handful of teachers before. But once the word got out, and once these courses were made available, students showed up in droves. At University of California, Santa Cruz, they were worried. The typical math and science preparation class, they would have, say, 12, 15 students. So they're looking at what they could actually put together, and they ended up with, interestingly enough, 60 students signing up that first time. So that's, so the combination of why research universities, first is the facilities, but second, in that the students themselves at these universities are interested. They want to make a difference. They want to participate. They want to be involved. We're in our third year now. NIMSY, we're very fortunate, has selected 2 of our campuses, the Irvine campus and the Berkeley campus, to participate. We see these as linked endeavors. We're trying and striving for the same goals. And the last thing I'll say about why universities should be involved in this, echoing an earlier statement, is you play to your strength. What are we good at? We're good at research. And so we're treating this program as a scientific endeavor. We're not just ramping up the numbers. We're looking at what we're doing. We're identifying these essential components. We're comparing with other programs and their essential components, and we're rigorously subjecting them to scientific inquiry. Are these components working? Are these, is it making a difference? If so, how much? How can we measure or quantify this? And I think that aspect of this initiative sometimes gets lost in the sort of drive to produce 1,000 teachers or 10,000 teachers. It's not just that we're trying to find 10,000 people to stick in front of classrooms. We're trying to really find people that are motivated, prepare them well, and understand this process and how all these components fit together. So I think that that's really, in a nutshell, what's sort of unique and special about having the research universities involved in this and what we're doing at University of California. Let me just end with sort of challenges and next steps. A lot of the parts, the components, these essential components of this program, actually we're working to institutionalize. Taking courses, designing a coherent sequence of classes that build upon each other, that put the students in connection with the pedagogy, what it means to know and learn mathematics and science, and to have a world-class preparation in mathematics and science itself. The additional piece, which we identified earlier as so critical, actually being out in schools and working with teachers. doesn't fit so well under a normal university funding structure. And so one of the challenges and what we're seeking Congress and business and industry partners for is helping with that piece, trying to come up with ways of supporting those which we believe to be critical experiences in preparing new teachers that don't really have much of an analogy in sort of regular university course structures. So, so the university can do its part and try to institutionalize, set up these programs, set up these coherent curricula, but at the same time, the field experiences and the research and lab experiences outside, out in the field, are the ones that we're really trying to fit together and find ways of supporting. So I really appreciate your help in this. Thank you very much.
Patrick, thank you. Robert, before we jump to you, the chairman has just arrived. And we always in Washington, people say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. But having worked as a staff person on Capitol Hill for more years than I dare admit, I know how much truth there is in that. So we're delighted to have you here. The chairman is chairman of the subcommittee on research and education, science education. Fits perfectly with today's topic. Now, I have to warn you, he is also a clinical psychologist. And there are a number of people here who could use your help.
And here at the Congress, I know that.
And he also was chaired the department at Pacific Lutheran and practiced psychology in Oregon and Washington. And being a native Oregonian myself, I'm sure almost all that practice was north of the Oregon border there.
No, I worked in Bend.
Oh, you did? Oh, we have St. Charles. Karen, who teaches at High Desert Middle School in Bend. Well, please, the floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to be casual because I just walked in an already humid DC morning, so forgive me, I live a few blocks away. So thank you, first of all, for being here and for your presentations. This is Hillary Kane, who's my ledge director on my team, and is also in charge of my science work, my congressional staff. This is something we're passionate about. And when I say we, I mean we in the Science Committee. Chairman Gordon sends his regards. Of course, he was the prime author behind the America Competes Act, which was really modeled after Norm Augustine's really critical report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm. And so he had another commitment that he wanted me to send his regards, and he is absolutely committed to this, as is, I should say, Speaker Pelosi. And so, frankly, as President Bush, we have bipartisan agreement on the importance of improving our education system, and particularly improving science and math education. As you may know, many of you I'm sure do, the America Competes Act has a provision on it, 10,000 minds, 1 million, 10,000 teachers, 1 million minds. You're exactly right. It's not just putting bodies into the classroom. It is making sure they're skilled and trained teachers, which is why we included an effort to try to integrate the discipline-specific training with teacher education. On many of our campuses, I can tell you POU's was this way. It is as if the architects got together and said, what is the greatest mathematical distance we can place the education department from the sciences? And quite literally, if you measured it out, it was as far away as you could possibly be on campus, thus making it more and more difficult for science majors to also be education majors or vice versa. Part of the America Competes Act is an incentive for collaborative, interdisciplinary training, and ultimately, I think we need to expand on that. We need also to make it more easy to bring in professionals in the field who are already trained and skilled in what they do. For example, I could not teach government in a high school class. That seems rather silly. Why couldn't somebody who works for IBM or Microsoft or any of the other companies, or ExxonMobil, why could they not be able to teach high school classes? So we need to bridge that gap as well. A couple of other initiatives I'll just share briefly, and then I'd be happy to take any questions or suggestions, but I plan to stay around a little bit and hear more of your presentation. One is, we talk a lot about the science and math education. The other side of the education perspective that I think is hugely neglected in our country is career and technical education. When I talk to employers, yes, some look very much like the top level scientists, engineers, mathematicians, but many tell me, look, I need a diesel mechanic, I need a truck driver, I need a dental hygienist as well. And when we look at the dropout rates in this country, part of that is because the hands-on learning that once kept people in school and gave them honorable, well-paying careers is just becoming a thing of the past. And many times, interestingly, that kind of career or training track actually channels people back into the four-year track. We had a great program in one of our schools in our district where they're taking cooking oil from the cafeterias and recycling it into biodiesel. And what's absolutely beautiful about this is you've got the young people who are in the diesel mechanics class working with the science geeks in the same room, and they're all working together because the diesel mechanic guys know how to make a diesel engine work, and the science geeks understand about synthesis and catalysts and all this kind of stuff, and they get together in a very beautiful way, and they're actually running some of the diesel buses from our school district on this. So that green jobs integration, I think, is incredibly important. Two other quick notes. One, we look at the demand for high-tech workers today, and there's a temptation to say, well, let's, not just a temptation, it's also a reality, let's get more of these workers from overseas through the H-1B program. Now, I think we need to expand H-1B visas, but I think there needs to be a caveat, and I've introduced legislation to this effect. And the caveat is this. Businesses that want to expand their numbers of H-1B visas would have to demonstrate a commensurate commitment to educating the American workforce. Now, ExxonMobil through the NIMT initiative, Microsoft, Nintendo through its DigiPen Institute, Dell, Intel, many of the companies already do this. But I can tell you that in my district, which has a number of high-tech firms, and I'll name one and then leave others nameless, one is a company called Enlight Photonics, one of the leading diode laser companies in the world. They have put their engineers into the classrooms. They bring kids. Can you imagine being a high school science major and going into the labs at a top quality semiconductor laser facility and working with the top PhDs? I was kind of a geek myself. I've gone crazy about that. They're doing it. Now, simultaneously, we have other companies in our district who, when we ask them, can you help out with our local education system, they're just too busy, but they're never too busy to ask me for more H-1B visa slots. And my take would be, look, you want those H-1B visa slots, we respect the need for that, we don't want you to relocate overseas, we understand that argument, but show a commitment to educating the American workforce. A, it's the right thing to do, but B, it's the politically much easier sell. If I go back to my district at a time of low employment and challenging economics and say, gee, I've got good news for you, I'm making it easier for our companies to get employees from overseas rather than here, I'm in some trouble. Politically, it's much easier to say, but the employees who are first in line, or the employers who are first in line, are those who have demonstrated an effort to bring the domestic workforce up. Finally, one of the other challenges we face is a language challenge in two directions. One, we need to do more to train non-English speakers in English, and simultaneously, we need to train more English speakers in foreign languages, especially the non-typically taught languages, Chinese, Arabic, etc. We have an initiative that addresses both of those, which I've authored. One, it would create a 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week, English language education program, so that you could turn on the television set and whatever your native language, learn English. And my assumption is we would create a free channel using the digital spectrum, and we would have people log on to that or turn it on TV, and then there would be supported material. So if your native language is Vietnamese or Russian or Spanish, whatever it is, you could go to your local church or whatever and get this material to supplement the TV channel. And then in parallel to that, on another channel, would be foreign language training for U.S. Native English speakers who want to learn foreign languages. When in the high-tech world today, multilingual skills are incredibly, incredibly valuable. Last thing is, I'm sure you're all familiar with the McKinsey report, which I think is really insightful. The topic of how to train teachers. One of the things the McKinsey report I think says is so important is it is not just about training teachers, it is also about the teacher selection process very, very early in the pipeline. And apparently many of the countries that are quite well ahead of us in their outcomes on science and math education, early on, screen very rigorously for who should be in the teaching profession. We don't just say, well, let's open it up. Anybody who wants to be an education major, you're an education major. They say, these are the numbers of slots we have. These are highly competitive slots. They are well respected. They are well rewarded. And we expect our best and brightest to enter teaching. Not just, my father was a teacher, I've been a teacher before, but there's that painful old saw of those who can do and those who can't teach. In some cases that's the case, but in other cases there are phenomenal people doing an amazing job in a very difficult situation. Those people deserve rewards and respect and recognition, but Pre-screening up front would ensure that more of those people get in the pipeline, and the knowledge that they're pre-screened would do a lot, I think, to help the profession. Ultimately, there's nothing more precious in our lives than our children. And when we send them to school, we have a right to expect that the people who are caring for them are the most well-trained, highly selected, highly skilled, and highly motivated individuals. And frankly, and I know this upsets some folks, frankly that means several things. Pre-screening up front, rewarding those who achieve and rewarding high competitive programs, and then also making it easier to remove those teachers who do not measure up. My belief is the public will increase funding for education if they believe those three things apply. If all teachers are highly qualified, people are willing to train, to pay more for those teachers, but we've all had the experience of a bad teacher, and we know that those folks should not be in charge of our kids' lives. So that's a brief summary of some of what I've been working on, and I welcome any questions or suggestions, and I know you've got more greater experts than I here. So. Questions or?
Oh, no.
I'm okay either way. Any comments or suggestions or questions?
Well, I wasn't sure. Oh, please, go ahead.
Sure, just very quickly, under America Competes, what's the prognosis for appropriation?
You know, when I go back home, I always tell folks, you know, we love when we get an authorization, man, we make a big headline, but in our back, our minds, we know it's a bit of a fudge, a big fudge. I tell folks back home, you know, authorizing is like when your teenager says, Mom and Dad, can I go to the movies? You say, sure. They've been authorized to go to the movies. Appropriation is when they say, can I have $20 to go to the movies? We were so close last year. As you know, America Competes authorized the doubling of the NSF budget over the next 7 to 10, depending on how it works out on the approach side. But and we were really close, and then the president called for a $22 billion cut from the omnibus last year, and unfortunately, as you know, science got a hard hit on that. America Competes got hit, the EATR program got hit, other programs. If there's good news, it is that, again, Speaker Pelosi's on board, Congressman Callahan's on board, I understand the Senate side is on board, the President's clearly on board. The problem is going to be that my belief is we're heading very likely for another appropriations train wreck of some sort at the end of the year. The other problem is, to be perfectly honest, just the legitimate fiscal circumstance of our country. The budget deficit for the first 6 months this year is $311 billion, first 6 months. The debt is $9.4 trillion. The Government Accountability Office tells us the 75-year horizon of present value of our current commitments is $52 trillion, which is 95% or 90+% of the net worth of all the American people. And that's not necessarily counting supplemental appropriations for the war, etc. And as long as we want to have growing entitlement programs, wars, and tax cuts, something's going to have to give, and that's the challenge. And I think there's broad agreement that we're eating our seed corn if we make the cuts in the high technology, in the science, and in the education fields, but hungry people eat their seed corn. We make bad choices, right? So I'm hopeful, but you know, having seen, you know, my first election, I got elected, and then they recalled me basically because the late absentee ballots came in, and they said, "Oh, you didn't quite get enough votes to win." I was actually back here. We felt that way a little bit with America Competes. You know, we worked so hard, we authorized an increase. You get the money in the budget, do the omnibus, and then no, sorry, you got to pull something out, and we got wiped out. So I'm optimistic but realistic.
That McKinsey report also emphasizes that.
Well, introduce yourself.
I'm David Biden from Stony Brook University. Countries that did well, the teachers had a tremendous amount of status. How do we get from where we are now to that?
You know, I think it was Dan Moynihan who said something really important, and it was that, I'll paraphrase because I don't recall the exact quote, but it was, we tend, he did this on a sort of partisan line basis, and he said that the problem with Democrats is that Democrats tend to overestimate the role of government and underestimate the role of culture. And Republicans tend to underestimate the ability of government to influence culture. And I think several things. First, if it's more selective, the role of teachers will go up. Secondly, or the prestige. Secondly, if we remove the bad teachers. You know, once that an educator said, I said, what do you do? He says, oh, I don't work for a living, I'm a teacher. Man, I'd have fired him on the spot if I had the capacity. Removing the bad teachers will go a long way. Rewarding the good teachers will go a long way. I think a few other things. I think we need to tell people to turn off the television set. I think we need to have smaller schools. There's a ton of research on this. Going way back to Roger Barker's research in the big school, small school studies. I think smaller schools will help. Those are some of the measures. I think. What are your thoughts about how we can do it?
Well, I think public education via the media is certainly probably the strongest external thing the school is just a part of the culture. I mean, from our own experience, we find CSI and numbers and even playing poker on television influences young people tremendously to learn or to be attracted to skills. We've opened forensics camps, forensics programs based on the interest that CSI has developed. So some way of encouraging these kind of models to be seen, and I certainly don't want the government to be controlling that kind of activity, but some way of getting these models out in the public domain, which they're not now. I mean, would really be helpful because those mean something to young people.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that model of the role model issue is so important, and we've lost it. I'm pretty conservative for Democrat. I believe God has school uniforms. Mind you, this is coming. I should say, I didn't say at the start. I make it a point to try to visit every high school in my district every 2 years. I don't know anybody else in Congress who does it. So when I'm talking about what's happening in the schools, I spend them pretty much on average once a week. I'm in a classroom, and trying to the challenge our teachers face is immense. And so I talked to Terrence Powell last night. He was honored by National Science Foundation last night, and he talked about being at Thomas Jefferson High School, and all the kids wanted to sign his calculator. He's a rock star out there. This guy, they call him the Mozart of math. He's astonishingly brilliant, very personable. And there's that line in The World is Flat by Tom Friedman where he says, in India, Bill Gates is Britney Spears. In the United States, Britney Spears is Britney Spears. Some way to do that. But I think it needs to be strategic. I think it needs to be strategic and not just on PBS. Somewhere expanding that vision needs to happen.
I'm curious in terms of...
Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Michelle Zuckerman Parker with Allegheny Singer Research Institute in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm really energized and excited that we're all here. And I think that it's very easy to be critical of the situation because it is profoundly terrible, for lack of a better word. However, I would really like to know if it's possible that we find a place on the internet where we collectively can gather and identify what we know works. For example, I know that there's a UTeach website, and I know that there is information about what's going on at Stony Brook, and I know that there's information about what I do. But I think it would be phenomenal if the government now can say, hey, what about if we put what works for the STEM initiative together in one little place so that we could go there? Because I know even with getting together all of us today, it takes a lot of work, and there's always a last-minute arrangement in getting the information about when there will be a committee meeting and where it will take place and what's going on is very difficult. But we have the technology and we all have this desire. It would be really nice if we could come together in that virtual space.
I think it's an excellent idea. Is there somebody in the Department of Ed? I'm not trying to... I guess because I'm so passionate about education recently, it's been about 5 months ago now, but I looked on the Department of Education website and it got special areas supposedly dedicated to this. But what was pretty sad was I typed in the word excellent teaching in the search engine and got no hits. We spend an awful lot of money in this country on teaching excellence, and on the entity, well, it speaks for itself. I was kind of scratching my head. I said, well, gee, that's helpful. We do know what works to a large extent. We have abundant examples of pedagogical activities that work. We have abundant examples of teaching, training techniques that work. Oh, the one thing I didn't mention is empowering principals more. Earlier, the principal is supposed to be the academic leader of the institution, and just as we don't select our teachers well enough, I think we also don't select our principals. I had a woman in my office last week who was Teacher of the Year at the state level and the national level. She won all she wants to be a principal now. She's up against 4 folks, one of whom she Googled and had a DWI outstanding somewhere, 2 of whom had very little classroom experience or administrative experience, and the 4th, in her words, was a football coach. Now, you may make a fine principal, but that is not necessarily the kind of pool that we need in the poverty. I don't know. Does anyone know to what extent NSF or normally I would have said, well, Department of Ed, but I am chagrined at that. But whether NSF has anything on STEM education, teaching, we'll check into that. It's a good suggestion, and I'll check into it. Yeah, the Noise scholarships are designed, but do they have a sort of a clearinghouse?
There's no umbrella. There's no one place right now. And I think that's what's really important, is that we're all coming at this from very different angles, and that we have whimsy, and we have this, and we have this. And the NSF has their version, and the DOE has something. But we really need like one overarching place to put everything.
Yeah, it's an excellent suggestion. I will look into it. I promise I will follow up with that. Especially, there's a bit of a competition between NSF and the Department of Ed, as you may know. They're sort of the applied, and we're supposed to be the research. But if there's not anything even going on the web for the applied stuff from the research, then we have a problem. So I'll check and see if we can encourage NSF or DOE to work together.
Hi, I'm Kathy Gorski. I'm an Einstein Fellow, and I'm currently at the NSF. Although
That's got to feel great to have an Einstein.
it feels so good. You have no idea.
Yeah, I'm a Joe Namath. Never done. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. But that means I'm a K-12 teacher.
Okay.
On a year of professional development in D.C. But I'm at NSF in the Office of Polar Programs, and I know that because of some of the conversations that are going on there, that there have been talks with the National Science Digital Library as just being a repository for just those kinds of things that you're talking about. And it's grown so much in the last year. I don't work with NSDL directly kind of thing, but I do know those conversations are happening because there are the same concerns. We need a single place.
The State Department sponsored a very good workshop, well, it was a summit last week internationally, and one of the topics was, you probably all know about this, about Open University, the MIT initiative, basically put all coursework on. I think there are ways to work with that, but that's, of course, at the university level. I think pedagogical techniques and demonstrations at the high school level make a lot of sense. We'll look into it, and can we follow up with you?
I'm Carol with the University of California, and I follow education issues. There is an education, there is a clearinghouse at the Department of Education on what works, and it focuses on educational research around the country.
Yeah.
The problem is, you talk about reality, the Department of Education spends less than half of 1% on education research. So if that's a priority and that's all we spend on it, you're not going to have a whole lot in the education clearinghouse. So if we want to make education research, because there's fabulous stuff going on, not just at University of California, but throughout the country. And there's wonderful examples of terrific, practical research that would help in the classroom, but getting it disseminated across the country costs money. And if we're only going to spend, less than half of 1% on education research, we're just not going to have a lot in that clearinghouse.
In medicine, there's a move, as you all know, towards evidence-based practice. And in education and in medicine, there's this fine line of trying to disseminate the evidence, but not being so rigid that you just tie the teacher's hand and make the job miserable. But finding ways, all of us who've taught, occasionally we've encountered a colleague who teaches something in a certain way, and you say, gosh, that's the way to teach it. That's better than how I'm teaching it. And this should be, the power of the web should be able to dramatically expand that. One other thing that I believe that I haven't mentioned, and Bern Ehlers, who's my ranking member and used to be the chair, you all know Bern, physicist, a brilliant guy. We're good friends. And Bern and I are also both of the controversial belief that we need a voluntary national curriculum. There's all this talk about local control, but it's frankly a shibboleth, not a policy. And the reality is most people who advocate local control couldn't name a school board member and have no idea what the local curriculum is. But almost all the countries that are whooping us have a national curriculum. And I did I looked up this up the other day. I think, don't quote me on this, but the census, I think, looked it up last week. I think 40 million Americans move every year. It may be higher than that. And every time a kid moves, they fall out of sequence if they actually cross district lines. this is just pretty silly. We need a national curriculum and individualized instruction, so people can move through that curriculum at their own pace, and if they move to a different school, they're not out of sequence, out of textbook, and it would lend itself all the more to this kind of procedure. So people, the 8th grade teachers would all be sort of on the same, more or less the same page, and if you're teaching, you know, Venn diagrams or something like that, somebody can say, here's how I do it, and you can find it. So.
Another thing that I
Please introduce yourself.
I'm also at Allegheny Research Institute. We have a program working with high school teachers to teach them to update content knowledge. And one of the things that I'm wondering is, what about teachers as they graduate and then tracking them as they go into the school system? It seems to me that when teachers graduate from the university, they're very excited. They're very, very enthusiastic about teaching, and then something happens between their graduation and their going into the school system. And what happens to them? What happens that they lose that enthusiasm, they lose that spark of innovation, lose their passion? And is it the politics of the way our schools are constructed? Is it the school boards telling them what they need to teach? Having to deal with parents, dealing with the bureaucracy of education and local education, or everybody seems to be focusing on it being education and pedagogical instruction, but it seems to me that there's another layer there.
Mm-hmm. Probably paying off student loans and just the quest to get a job. I think all of that's probably true. I think that's one of the problems, sort of the oversupply problem of teachers that is inherent in our structure of selecting the teaching major. That is not the case in some of the aforementioned countries. It would be a dramatic change for us to say how many teachers do we need in the pipeline, and then work together in some way with the educational institutions to say, look, try to keep it more or less in these boundaries and allocate it among the various institutions that way. But to some extent, competing hard to get a job and then having or to get an education major opportunity, but having some confidence that if you are up to steam, you'll get a job, would allow you to sort of have more confidence as you move in. But I think the bureaucracy is undoubtedly part of it. And I'll finish shortly because I know you don't want to.
Oh, no, please.
Bob Floden from Michigan State University, so Bern Ehlers, Michigander. One of the answers to this may also be continuing support for teachers in their first couple of years of teaching.
Yes.
What gets called induction. One of the things that happens is they go out there by themselves and they're in an environment that doesn't feel very much like the program that they just finished. And teacher education, higher ed's involvement in induction is one of the things that could help solve this problem. At Teachers for New Era, I'm one of the Teachers for New Era institutions, and at UTeach, this induction is a big theme that helps keep teachers energized and keep them wanting to stay in the system.
And many other countries do that in a very purposeful manner. For a couple of years, you have sort of an internship, almost like a residency program, and I think that makes it, you just kind of get your hands around the discipline side, the complexities of the material, the issues of dealing with parents. You need somebody to just talk to. You know, we do in clinical psychology, we do a full year internship, and then you do 2 years of supervised postdoc work before you get your license. So on top of the 8 years of undergraduate and graduate work, you've got 3 years before you're out there on your own. And even then, most of us, if we're smart, are not on our own. We've got colleagues to kick around ideas with. This is, co-supervised, that kind of stuff. I think it's a great idea.
And you talk about the McKinsey report. I mean, this idea of learning from international comparisons is important. And one of the things NSF is supporting now is a study of the preparation of mathematics teachers in 18 countries, secondary and lower secondary and upper secondary, where it extends into looking at the structure for teacher preparation and the extent to which the countries provide that. And that will be, it's an important thing the NSF can do to help find out things that can help everybody learn from other countries about what models might work in the United States.
I should mention that one of the other priorities for myself and NSF or in our subcommittee this year is scientific diplomacy. And we're doing a series of hearings to really raise the U.S. profile again in this interactive topic today with business and education. I think international scientific exchanges are critical not only for scientific advancement, but also our diplomatic efforts, and we're really leading efforts on our committee to try to do that. But we also need to recognize, as you're saying, that we can learn. You know, if somebody's beating me at something, for me to continue to pretend, well, I've got a lot to teach you, it's a little presumptuous, sort of the American way, you know, we assume that. But if somebody's beating me, I want to find out what they're doing. I'm going to watch the videos of the opposing pitcher. I'm going to, you know, figure out what they're doing.
I think that should be, you know, 50 Cent, we had Sputnik and people got excited. Now there's nothing really tangible. I'm a big fan of Rising Up Together and Storm. I was involved in it. But there's been the tangible things missing. One thing that could be done would be to educate the public about how these other countries are really whipping us. And that's not in gathering, Rising Up Together.
It's there a little bit.
But it has, certainly the public is not aware of anything the kids report, that's unless you read the Economist or Golden State.
Yeah, right.
They're not going to be aware of that. Getting that word out there, they're whipping us. How are they whipping us? And get people a little more, you know, make it a mini study. You haven't got anything out there now that can really, if you go out and try to sell this to the public, you're going to be a hell of a good speaker to sell it. It just is a hard sell. We need more tangible evidence of how we're being whipped. And while I agree we need more research, when somebody's whipping me, I go try to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Get me out of the lab. I want to go see what the people are really good doing and try to learn from them.
Yeah, we had a hearing with Bill Gates, and you know, it's the 50th anniversary of the Science Committee in the Congress. It was created post-Sputnik, not coincidentally. Some are looking towards the energy crisis, and there's some real enthusiasm for that. It's really interesting within business and within academia. The energy crisis, and you know, our head of our Bonneville Power Administration likes to go to computer schools and say, yeah, you can go into the gaming industry or you can go into defense. But the software to deal with our energy production and distribution system turns out to be very challenging and also very important. It can save tremendous amounts of money and carbon, and so that it is hard to sort of get that spark that inspires people nationwide to make this commitment. But I think that's what we need.
I'm Karen Steiner, Department of Energy, Office of
Another
Science.
Einstein fellow.
I gotta become that. When I travel overseas, they sort of by default refer to you as Your Excellency. I kind of like that. That's now settled on your more or less mediocrity. That's okay.
But one thing I do want to say is we cannot forget the second career teachers. Both of us have been second career as well as a lot of other Einstein fellows. And I think that from the experience we have in industry, that coming to the classroom, we not only have a passion, but also the idea of the camaraderie, the cohort, the collaboration. We can't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And all too often, it does scare, I would have scared me to be a teacher right out of college and shut a classroom door. And I will say that my first experience was in inner city in San Diego, and that was one of my best experiences. But if I hadn't had my 6 years behind me in understanding the world and how it works, I think that I brought more richness into the classroom. So we can't forget those people. And as just real briefly, as I travel around to the national laboratories and meet with scientists, there are so many of them that say, wow, I would love to teach, but naturally they are teachers. And yes, they're in high-end scientific research, but they also have a passion for teaching and students, and they're doing phenomenal jobs in the laboratories.
I think we make the hurdle too high in terms of what it takes to go from a profession into teaching. My belief is you should be able to do it in a year. We had a former member of Congress, Rod Chandler, from Wyoming State, making a whole lot of money as a lobbyist, but he always had a passion to be a teacher. And in 60, I think it was, or late 50s, he went back and got his teaching certificate. He's out teaching. And bless him, I mean, he's a brilliant guy. He could have made, you know, multi-figures as a lobbyist, and was. But you know, he had to take 2 or 3 years, and I just don't think it should take that long. You know, one last thing about the question. I know one of the themes is what can business do of today's meeting. I think business has a role to play here, and obviously people like ExxonMobil and the aforementioned companies and other companies that are doing the teacher prep. But how do you raise the profile of teaching? And I think some bright marketer, you know, if people walking on the beach can sell Pepsi, then complimenting a teacher might sell your product. In other words, maybe there's a way that businesses, through their marketing campaigns, can market education and indirectly benefit their own bottom line, while at the same time raising this profile. I have a hunch that that's the case. I have a hunch that if a some major industries were to embark on marketing campaigns that said, Company X recognizes outstanding teachers. And they know a whole series in intriguing ways, and there are clever people out there. To just kind of raise that profile, I think there might be some merit to it, both on a bottom line perspective for the company, but also on raising the stature and the status of, especially with personal stories about so-and-so came back into the teaching profession. Or, just kids. I'm brainstorming here, but there's nothing better as a teacher than a young person who comes back to you and says, you changed my life. That's the merit thing.
But see, the interesting thing is, I started out in university as an engineer, went back and got my teaching certificate, taught middle school science in inner city schools in North Carolina. Open house, the teachers would come in and say, we heard you were an engineer, straight out of college, making more money than we do. Why would you do this? Parents don't understand it.
Right.
It's really interesting.
What was your answer?
I said, because I love science, and the reason I wanted to be a science teacher was because I had so many crappy science teachers, and so many bad. I was the only female in my engineering school, and I had physics professors telling me, you're never going to make it because you're a girl. So the reality was I wanted to be the teacher who would make better teachers out there.
Roll the tape and run the ad.
And I think that's what it would take, because we do need to educate the industries to say, hey, let's provide these scientists and these researchers time off from work to go into the classrooms, but let's help those teachers get that time.
Well, I'm aware this room is equipped with the most dangerous thing you could have on Capitol Hill, a clock that is stopped in a stationary position while a member of Congress is speaking. Thanks for another interesting joining you today. Thanks for all your good work. I didn't plug the Wilson Center enough. I should have. The sponsors of today's event are doing some real leadership in this area. I'm grateful for it. If you have a chance later on, would you mind swinging on the office? Would you mind? Sorry. You got a card. Upstairs, right?
He knows how to find me.
2423, right, 2442. Sorry about that. Would you mind? Thank you for the work you're all doing. Take care.
Thank you.
What's next?
Well, that was, I must say, just speaking for myself, a real treat, and it makes me again wish that cloning were a little more advanced. More of that energy and focus and enthusiasm. And speaking of energy, focus, and enthusiasm, Bob, floor is yours.
This is hard now. After that, let me just say a little bit about Teachers for a New Era. I'm Bob Floden. I'm at Michigan State University, and I'm going to say a few words about Teachers for a New Era as a national initiative, and then say a few things about what's happening in Michigan State. Teachers for a New Era is an initiative started by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Dan Fallon, who was the head of the education program at the time there, has had a long-term commitment to the idea that you could improve teacher education, particularly by getting arts and science faculty together with education faculty to work on improving teacher preparation. So when he was the provost at Maryland, the University of Maryland, he put together Project 30, which was an organization of universities that devoted to this. And when he went to the Carnegie Corporation, he decided to do this on a different scale, smaller number of institutions, but larger investment of the corporation. And they had an elaborate process run by the Rand Corporation where they selected 11 teacher preparation institutions in the United States to represent the breadth of institutional mission in the United States. As you know, there are 13 or 1,400 institutions that prepare teachers in the United States. And although for many of them a model like UTeach might be appropriate, there are a lot of other excellent models out there, and not all models fit all institutional types. So They selected 11 programs where they thought there was already excellent teacher preparation going on, but where they thought that the faculty had the capacity to make further improvements that might be models for other institutions and might influence state policy, in particular in their states, to make changes. And so they included places like Stanford University, University of Connecticut, Michigan State University, all R1 universities, but also places like Cal State Northridge, which is a master's degree institution primarily dedicated to teacher preparation, doing enormous volume, 1,700 a year. They're one of the biggest suppliers to the LA Unified School Districts. Bank Street College of Education, a tiny place that doesn't even have an arts and science faculty. They prepare teachers mostly for lower elementary grades in New York City area. And Florida A&M, a historically black college. And they said to these places they wanted them to follow a few principles that seemed promising for improving teacher preparation, and to follow these principles in improving the programs at their own places. The 3 principles are that it's important to use evidence in improving your programs, and gathering more evidence, a theme that we've heard here, is an important part of the work of teacher preparation, and I'll say a little bit more about the challenges of doing that in a minute. Have education faculty and faculty in the arts and sciences work together to figure out what would constitute the best teacher preparation at their institutions, and to work on structuring the field experience and improving field experience in ways that involve the continuing participation of higher education in work out in the field, so that everybody says field experience is an important part, but sometimes what happens is you do stuff in the college classroom, and then you say, now you're going to go do your field stuff, and we picked some good schools, and you go out and do that stuff, and there's not a connection there. And we've heard about the importance of the connection between those two things from the other 2 speakers. And in particular, each of the Teachers for New Era institutions was charged with creating an induction program to work with their own graduates, and typically worked out to work with the graduates of other programs in the areas too, to have a continuing involvement in the preparation of teachers in their first couple of years of teaching, a theme that we were talking a little bit about. So these 11 institutions have been working at this for about 5 years now. They were selected in 2 phases, and Michigan State University is now in its 6th year of this program, and we've done a wide variety of things with the funds from the Carnegie Corporation, and we also had to raise matching funds dollar for dollar to do this work, and we've done that. I'm not going to talk about all the things we're doing. I want to focus on the things we're doing to work with the arts and science faculty, particularly around the question of, well, what's the best content preparation for people who are going to be elementary and secondary teachers. And I want to say about Teachers for New Era in general, and us in particular, that although we've heard today a lot about the need for more math and science teachers, that was not the focus of Teachers for New Era. It was around how do you produce better teachers for the numbers that you have. And Michigan State has already been a large producer. We produce as many secondary math and science teachers as UT Austin does now that they've ramped up UTeach. So we were already doing that sort of volume, as well as preparing 300 elementary teachers a year, all of whom will be teaching mathematics and science in K-6, certainly, some of them in grade 7 and 8 if they're in self-contained classrooms. And what we've done to try to work on this content question is we put together teams that included education faculty and arts and science faculty in each of the core areas. So for today, I'm going to talk about mathematics and science. And so we had a math department faculty member and a College of Education department faculty member, and leading the math team with then other mathematicians and education people and K-12 people on that team. And in the science department, we have somebody in the College of Natural Science. It's currently a biologist. and somebody in the School of Education who work together. And again, we populate this group with people in a balance between the science, the College of Natural Science, the science departments. We focused on biology, the people in education, and involvement with the K-12 people. And so the question is, one of the questions they were working on was, so what do people need to know to be terrific teachers of high school biology? We focused on secondary biology in the science team. And one of the ways that we engaged the scientists was by having them look at some different science teachers who were doing different sorts of things, and to talk about how they knew the science that they knew. And to oversimplify, the science teacher that they really liked, that was doing a terrific job, had something that went beyond the ability to recite all the stuff they'd learned in science classes and to go through the memorization that they have to do as a part of their training as biologists. They learn a lot of vocabulary. And not to put that down, the vocabulary is an important part of science teaching, but what the science teacher they didn't like, wasn't very good at, was taking a novel problem and thinking their way through it. And I see the biology people over there nodding their heads. And we have these examples of stuff like, the simple one is, here's a tree, and here it was at age 1, and here it is at age 30. And it's a lot bigger. Where did the mass come from? And these are people, who have studied this stuff, and they should, you'd think they could do this like that, but they're sort of trying to remember. So where did I learn about where the mass came from? Those of you who aren't biologists, we can talk later about where the mass comes from. Isn't from the water. It's not from the minerals. So think about where the mass comes from. So we focused on an introductory biology class. We're a big university, so we run these biology classes with 500 students a semester, intro biology, and we engaged the biology instructor in saying, let's think about how to do this in a way where they'll learn all this vocabulary because they need that, but they'll also get experience largely in the lecture sections of trying to think through problems. And they do this stuff that's very big in other institutions now, where they use clickers. You may have seen this thing. So they use the lecture and they do things where they'll put up a problem and they'll have a multiple choice thing, and the students will click on something, and the instructor can see, oh, they don't get this. And then they can have exercises that they do as part of the lecture. So I'm not going to go into detail, but the good news is that we managed to change the instruction in this intro biology course, and we do the testing. So they have test data on this course that goes back a number of years on the stuff that's more oriented around learning I'm oversimplifying, but learning vocabulary. And they've developed some new assessments with part of our matching money from an NSF grant, where they could test students' abilities to reason their way through these biological models. And what they found was that students do better on the latter, the stuff they're trying to work on, without falling down on the other. And not only that, but if you look at the division of the students who were the top students in SAT scores do about the same. They were already getting this. The students who don't show up to class aren't doing any better. They're still not showing up to class and they're not learning this. But the students in the middle, who are not the greatest people coming in, but who come to class, do better on these reasoning tasks, learning to apply the scientific models, and they don't do any worse on the other stuff that they need to be learning. So we're very excited about this. We got the scientists engaged, and it was very important to engage the scientists, both in thinking about through what you needed to do, and they teach these classes. They don't teach them in education. They learn the science in the science classes. So we're doing similar stuff in the math. We've been more focused on elementary. We've engaged the mathematicians in thinking about elementary math and what you need to learn there, and doing some things there. So just two sort of challenges in this. One is we'd like to also connect what we're doing in teacher preparation to what happens when they go out and teach in the K-12 schools. And in Michigan, we cannot, at the state level, connect the data on pupil learning, of which, with No Child Left Behind, there is an enormous amount, grades K-8 anyway, or 3 through 8 anyway, in math anyway, not so much in science, to the teacher data. There are only, somebody at our thing yesterday was saying there are 7 states where it's possible to do this. We're not among the 7. One of the federal roles is to provide funds and incentives to get the states to connect their pupil and teacher data. And the other challenge is around induction, that we've got an induction program, and in Michigan it's hard to find new teachers right now. The economy is so bad. We're sending a lot of the people you need to teach math, they're coming from Michigan. Because there aren't a lot of jobs teaching math in Michigan right now. There will be soon. But in terms of induction, Michigan, like many states, has a state mandate that there will be induction, but there's no financial support behind it. So one of the things we're hoping that's part of America Competes would be support for induction nationwide. And I think I'll stop there. And thank you very much.
I think our panel will be delighted to take a few questions. Please.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm currently a partner that working on STEM issues in the technology, and I graduated from UCC. So I have a question.
So did I. Excellent.
And I took one teacher I got I have a question about the Cal Teach program. Is it a uniform program with requirements and classes you take at all the campuses, or do you give the individual schools kind of flexibility in terms of how they set it up? Because I know that all campuses and their requirements are different, especially between CSU and UC.
Right, and that's a really interesting question. So the answer is that all the campuses had some leeway in how to structure their programs, but we have come together as a system to acknowledge that there's some incentive to try to coordinate this. And so I was alluding to identifying essential components. One of the things we're doing right now is mapping out what are the curricular elements that we believe are important. This also alludes to what Bob was talking about. What does a math teacher really need to know to become an effective, powerful teacher? So we are in the process of really trying to have a picture. This is also related to the UTeach effort, where they've laid out a sequence of courses. So what we have is something that's sort of right now a little bit in the middle. But what's interesting is that how do we go to that next step to getting something that's not necessarily exactly uniform, because local variations will always exist, but what are those essential elements that are the same across the campuses? And we're trying to do this in a way that's informed by evidence. And this is, to me, one of the most exciting parts about being involved in this project right now, is trying to look at what are these best practices, what are these courses, and not only that, to me, are they coherent? Do they build on each other in a way that's logical and robust intellectually, and not just the problem we have with a lot of education where someone says, oh, I think this is really important, this is important, so you just throw everything into the basket and then assume that that all comes out together.
Can I follow up on that? Because I work for UC, I'm learning from Patrick. Also,
You know each other?
Yeah.
We just met.
But there is a certain set of courses that represent Cal Teach, the Cat 1, Cat 2. Is that?
That's right. We have.
Maybe that's kind of what.
It was taught at all
Yes.
the CSUs and all the UCs.
Right. So I realize I might not have answered exactly. We do have a sequence of courses, 4 years of courses. There's something happening every year, and that every campus is offering that. And this is new. This did not exist a few years ago.
Is it not at the Cal States, or is it at the Cal States?
The Cal State
They have
system
their own.
has their own thing.
Okay. But they're still part of Cal Teach, or the broader thing, or no?
No.
Okay, the intention I have is that so they're not.
They have something. Ours originally was called the Science and Mathematics Initiative,
Right.
which rolled this out. They have the Math Science Teacher Initiative, MISTI, if you'd like to know. Yeah. Yeah, we can't. SMI, SMI, SME, it doesn't roll on. So, but fortunately, CalTeach is as good as this program. But yeah, both systems have been brought up to address this challenge. And I'm personally trying to work with the CSU counterparts in thinking about this. Because one thing about teaching preparation is it is multi-system. Teachers, talk to any teacher you meet and ask them, very few of them went through this linear progression exactly as this idealized model of teacher preparation. Many of them have gone to community colleges, they've taken courses, they've had, careers. They're very nonlinear. I think we need to sort of respect the reality of that and think about how to think about that system that allows for the teachers to sort of move around in that way. So,
I'm David Mandel. I'm with the new Carnegie Institute of Data Study. And I wanted to ask a question about that AP program, in part because one of the things that the Commission is trying to look at sort of places where there's more and less leverage opportunities in the system. And AP is an interesting example. And one, it raises a couple of questions about sort of what the consequences of making a choice have been or might be down the road. Imagine a couple of different kinds of consequences. One really good consequence would be not only that the AP programs be expanded and the sort of equity issue that's trying to be addressed there be addressed well, but that those teachers might also become more effective as non-AP teachers as well. And so we know anything about whether any of that's going on as we're expanding AP. The flip side of that could also be that as you create incentives for teachers to go into AP, they may be leading places where there's a big need, like, for instance, ninth grade mathematics, where we know that kids who had a checkered math history coming into ninth grade and then don't have a good ninth grade math experience become sort of prime candidates for dropping out. And so, placing some more emphasis on, so let's say there's a choice here. I mean, it's not always a zero-sum game. Sometimes what you do next is a choice. And so, do you see any risk in drawing, let's say, the strongest teachers into teaching AP courses where they could be doing something else?
Well, let me somewhat answer your question. It's probably a more appropriate question for the leadership of the school districts who are implementing AP or who may have AP. I can't speak to Dallas in part. In Dallas, the experience has been generally the unintended consequences have been positive. So we haven't seen a fall off. And so some of the issues you addressed as in taking some of the better teachers and moving them to AP have not, at least on the surface, resulted in a lot of kids being left out who might otherwise have been in a very good teacher's class. What we saw in Dallas when we looked at the data on Dallas in great detail was that the typical AP teacher in one of these first 10 Dallas high schools that adopted the training incentive program usually started off teaching only one AP class. They taught one AP math course, maybe they taught calculus, AB, they had 5 students, 10 students, 15 students. So they still had 5 other classes to teach. And the simple point being that as more teachers qualified to become AP teachers, very few of them filled up in this urban school district with AP courses. So we think the consequence of that has actually been to bring a more qualified, more effective teacher who is receiving some additional incentives for those students who are taking AP, also teaching other students. Second consequence we saw was that there were more students who took the AP class, although they never intended to take the AP exam. And we actually we're seeing positive effects of that. You're just sitting in the AP class and going through the more rigorous coursework, more time on task, the Saturdays classes, et cetera, et cetera. The third consequence, which is anecdotal at best, and I'll admit that in advance, is that in some of the urban schools where there is a very, very strong culture of underachievement, in fact, there's almost a disincentive for achievement. I mean, the students, the peer-to-peer relationships. We're seeing anecdotally in some schools that kids who are taking the AP courses under the incentive program are actually becoming somewhat favored in their peer-to-peer relationships vis-a-vis other schools. So you're finding in an urban school that it's cool to be part of the group taking AP. They use terms like, why are you taking this course? Because I can get paid. I mean, it's, in the urban vernacular, that's a pretty powerful statement when you're dealing with all of the negative cultures in some of these schools. So I think as they expand, we'll actually potentially see that culture take root. I'm told in one of the schools, I think it's Woodrow Wilson in Dallas, AP is as prevalent and available as the typical well-financed Dallas area suburban school. So that's been a great outcome.
With a name like Woodrow Wilson, we're not surprised.
A quick follow-up to that. To me, it says that going from the 200 to 2,000 says that those students were not given that access. But what I'm wondering is, was there anything done at the middle school level, or were those students already coming with those skills and they were able to go right into the AP and were taking advantage of it?
I'm glad you brought that up. Part of and this is part of NIMSY, there is a structured program for all of the feeder middle schools for a high school that's selected for the AP program. We'll start a course called Laying the Foundation, LTF. And LTF starts as early as grade 6. There are vertical teams, and so under the structure, there's a lead teacher in the high school who is responsible for AP in that high school and for laying the foundation in the feeder middle schools for that high school. So it is a very structured program. It starts at grade 6, and part of it's increasing the pool of students with the requisite skills and therefore ability to enter AP once they reach high school. That's an important part of the program.
I'm going to make this the last question.
Okay, may I say one more thing, because I need to go ahead and do the commercial that everyone normally expects. I don't want to talk about buying gasoline. That's not the point. Write this down, please. www.sendmyteacher.org.
Send my teacher.
Send my teacher. Each summer, the ExxonMobil Foundation, in partnership with the Dr. Phil Mickelson, puts on a summer teachers academy for teachers in grades 3 through 5. 1 week, all expense paid. In the summer of 2009, it will be at the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey, we're going to bring in 100 teachers from across the country, and you can be nominated primarily by students. But if you tell teachers to get your students to nominate you, that's the way to get into the pool. I think it's an excellent program, and it's one way that it's 100 teachers, so it's not a huge program in terms of the broader need for teacher training, but it's to bring more publicity to this overall question of how can we support our teachers more, how can we provide the training that some of them who don't have the academic background in some of these subjects to be more effective in teaching, and particularly in this K-5 area where typical schools of education have not focused on subject matter content in math and science over the years, and many teachers don't possess the background to be comfortable in teaching math and science. So I think it's a great summer academy, and we're just trying to put the word out on the academy, but more importantly, to try to again bring broader national attention to teachers, and especially those who are teaching math and science to kids in grades 3 through 5.
It's the last question, then we'll go to the next panel.
Okay, thank you. In these great programs, which I think are great, and I don't know if you've thought about this or they exist, is there a way that you've looked to incorporate, say, a research experience in science and math as part of the teacher prep program? Because research experiences do two things for scientists and teachers. It solidifies their knowledge, as well as helps them understand why science needs to be taught this way, or it really helps them in understanding the approaches and the things that we need to teach these kids. And that certainly extends the time commitment from the teachers and everything, but I don't know if that's something you've considered in some of these programs. Anybody?
So, yes, so a couple different things. We have worked with the Dow Corning Foundation, I believe, where they provide funds to provide summer experiences for some of the science teachers in science labs. And we also, as part of our work with a large biological science course, there's a lab that goes with that, and one of the things we've just started is to have some of our prospective science teachers become the lab assistants in these courses for, science students in general. So we think it's very important.
The person sitting next to you was just out in California, and we at a STAR conference, which is exactly the type of program you're talking about. And at least I believe we have teachers signed up this summer to be starting in that. But I completely agree with you. It's the two things that I felt that we, business and industry, can help with, helping give people, prospective teachers out in real schools, and help getting them real research experiences. Those are the add-ons to the university core, which I think are essential.
Please, a round of applause. Leaves me feeling much better about the country. I have the last two, and we ran late. We got much more time with Chairman Baird than I'd anticipated when I was talking to Hillary, his assistant. That we know the Congressman maybe want to stay a few minutes and so forth. But he clearly was so engaged. Yeah, that's right. Briefer even than they plan to be, so we can get some conversation, and we promise to get you out the door. Although, as the Congressman pointed out, with a soft clock, I guess I have some flexibility. And as you know, among many other things, I'm an economist by background, so we're used to making seasonal adjustments, and I guess that applies to timing as well. Hey, why don't you start us off, if you would?
Sure, I'm David Bynum from Stony Brook University. I think I'm going to try to just take about 5 minutes to tell you a bit of what I said yesterday. I'll start at the end. We've created the Center for Science and Mathematics Education at Stony Brook. Happened last year. We're not involved only in teacher education. We operate really from pre-K to the postdoctoral level. We started this in 15 years ago with partnerships with the community colleges, not knowing anything about teacher education. And I'm a biochemist, and I evolve things grow and they're dynamic. And so over time, getting grants from the NIH, the NSF, the Howard Hughes, private money, parents of the offspring who have taken our programs, we've been able to really fund it, and we're always on the lookout for two things, money and talent. So when I'm down here, I'm after them.
Lots of talent down here.
There's lots of money too. We're working on that. In any event, regarding teacher education, this year we'll graduate over 50 teachers in science and mathematics education. In New York, you need a master's degree in order to get permanently certified. And so our teachers are coming out with a master's degree off the tee. Probably 90% of our education is involving master's degrees educated teachers. We do not have a school of education, which I consider a plus because we're already in the arts and sciences. We don't have to court and cajole and do all of these things. Our pedagogy, which is heavily based on pedagogical content knowledge, is in the departments. I mean, it's in the biochemistry department, actually, where I am, and our pedagogy is taught there as well. You need 15 graduate credits in the content in order to graduate, so you come out a real professional in the content. Our teachers, they offer programs in biology, chemistry, physics, earth sciences, and mathematics. If you look at the state exams, we're well above the average of the state in all of those areas. We're really turning out a quality teacher who is snapped up on the Long Island and beyond community. We have so many, we integrate the teachers into the university and we keep them there essentially as long as we can. In other words, when they graduate, we keep them coming back. We have summer programs where we bring them in where they teach, where they can learn, where they can co-teach in our summer camps for middle and high school students. We're bringing in 48 teachers this year, so we believe that once you get a good teacher, the university stays the intellectual center of their life. We don't go away, they don't go away, and we try to keep them coming back, and we're doing that. We want them to see Stony Brook as where they're going. And this is where I struggle a little bit with some of these models, and I think it's because I'm a biologist and a biochemist, and I see a very dynamic, evolving world, and I struggle with models that don't compete I think we need a lot of different models out there to test from, and we certainly have one at Stony Brook. It is not the only one. I value and respect everything that I've seen here, but we have a model that's kind of catered to our niche or our own environment, with no education school, a research one institution with very little interest in teaching. All of a sudden it's blossomed and flourished, and we've been able to attract a lot of talent and resources to the university. We've created so many things in the last 15 years. I'll tell you just one, the Biotechnology Teaching Center, which we took over in '95. We bring students in from middle and high school to work in our labs for half a day or a day. They do experiments in forensics, recombinant DNA, bacterial transformation. It's really hands-on stuff tied to the curriculum. They pay for this. It's a $17 fee per student, although we subsidize the high needs districts. We've now had over 40,000 students and their teachers come in to do this. Most of the school districts on Long Island have sent their students. And it's a very powerful way to get students and teachers to the university. We evaluate this. It's uniformly positive from coming to the university and from an intellectual standpoint. It builds a tremendous amount of political goodwill, but also intellectual activity and goodwill that way. Because this is a shortened time, I think I will stop here, but we have programs, again, that run the gamut from, we actually work pre-K up to the postdoctoral level, and we're really excited about building a model where the university ties in with the schools in a permanent partnership and doesn't go away no matter what the year is or what time of day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I neglected to say and to stress how much science is not involved in education. David is a professor of biochemistry and cell biology, and actually started life in the oil fields. So he's kind of started hands-on and has gone to science, and I was hoping to save the education system.
Still working on this guy who was sitting here to try to get you to New York.
Our next speaker is Karen Steiner, who we've already partially been introduced as an Einstein Fellow. She teaches at High Desert Middle School in Bend, Oregon. Always makes me feel at home, coming from Pendleton, Oregon myself. And she really is the head of the math team there. She's been working this year on a variety of things, and will reflect a bit on her experience in the classroom and in Washington.
Sure. First of all, I'm from the Department of Energy in the Office of Science in the Workforce Development for Teachers and Scientists group. And we believe strongly in the STEM initiatives, and also we do contribute directly to the preparation of professionals in STEM disciplines. With the national goal of helping America to become more competitive and compete internationally, we have many programs throughout our 18 national laboratories. DOE believes this is very important, not only to our nation, but also to our workforce at the Department of Energy, as well as the workforce in private corporations, and also we're intricately tied into K-16 and the ability of our math and science teaching and improving mathematics and science teaching. I'm just going to briefly go over this, kind of quickly. Here's a graphic of our 18 national laboratories spread across the nation. Different colors represent different scientific diversity within our laboratories, multi-purpose labs or single-purpose labs, National Nuclear Security Administration laboratories, as well as the geographic diversity. Students are involved in what we like to know as experiential or call experiential learning, in which they participate in a summer intensive program. Could be from mostly the undergraduate and pre-service teacher programs, or a 10-week program in the laboratories. We also have in-service teacher programs that can range anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks being in a laboratory. The I guess I would say our key that we see at the National Laboratory is a high-intensive laboratory experience with a scientific mentor and a master teacher mentor. Every one of our